Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls, children of all ages, though of some ages should probably not be listening to this show. We are Thunderdome Metal Reviews. I am the Reverend Ben Dangerously. With me, as always, are our new comrade, murdered by the mustard gas himself, Gabe Cooper, Tracy, the industrialist of an avian kind report, and the senator, David Pizzo.
Oh, I haven't changed that shit. I forgot. Yeah. I'm just going to leave it. Oh, man, y'all.
Well, we know how this is going to go tonight.
We do.
Yeah, we're all a little slap happy.
It's all going to go pear-shaped.
It's been a week.
It has been a week, but
it has been.
Through the
Gore-looking glass?
Ringer, not a looking glass, a ringer. I feel like that was like one of those drawing machines they used in the early 1900s that they just put a piece of cloth through and just rang it between two cylinders.
I mean, I was going to go with the bone-crushing device that Operation 1005 had to use. But yes, either pick your analogy. The point is it was long, brutal, and it's now over. And
the technology is very similar.
The technology is very similar. But now we're moving on to a slightly different New York-y place / I don't know, medieval Europe. Is that what's happening here? I know there's like cathedral bells and Brooklynites getting wasted. So
I don't know. All I can say is that the month of October is officially over, but the goth is still with us as we look at this album.
Mm-hmm.
This is my pick, so you can blame me for an album that was released in September. It is Infernum in Terra, the fourth studio album by a pale horse called Death, released on 9/24/2021 on Long Branch Records, a record label I'd never heard of. It was produced by Sal Abuscato, has a runtime of 54 minutes and 24 seconds. Sal Abuscato also did the vocals and the guitars. I read in one thing that he played all the instruments, or at least wrote everything on the album, but there are other musicians officially credited.
For sure.
Eddie Heedles on guitars, Joe Taylor on guitars, Audie McLaughlin on bass, which I love that name, Chris Hamilton on drums.
Audie and Eddie.
Indeed, Audie and Eddie. I mean, that sounds
Sal. Freaking Salvatore.
That's it is very
name.
New York.
That's my dad's name. Yeah, Salvatore.
Indeed. He is a veteran, a long veteran. He was in Life of Agony and also Typo Negative,
Indeed.
Which is why you see this slightly different shade of green tinged album cover, which looks like a woodcut from the time of the plagues. And I'm not mad about it. It looks pretty cool. I guess, David, in answer to your question from before we started recording, the horse is on the book cover.
Oh, yeah, it is, isn't it? I see it there. No, he's not wrong. It's there.
I just now noticed it myself.
Well played.
So this is a band that Tracy introduced me to.
I think it's the other way around.
Was it? Maybe.
Yeah, you introduced me to these guys.
Did I?
From what I knew, you told me to check them out. And from what I knew of, you're listening, this is for the podcast. We kind of talked about it, but I hadn't actually done it. And you're like, you should check these guys out. I'm like, okay. And so I heard that first album, couple months after that, the And Hell Will Follow, I think is it, or their 2013 one, Lay My Soul to Waste. And I was like, this doesn't sound like a Ben album. It's not fast, it's not heavy, it's not.
That was before you discovered my love of Doom. Goth and Doom. This is it is heavy, but it's
pretty heavy.
Not fast. But it's also not super slow. It kind of falls into the middle ground there, I thought. At least that's my conception of it. I've listened to much slower things. We reviewed much slower things.
We have.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't the typical thrash or an later Carcass. It wasn't one of those two.
I don't think it's doom metal.
It's doom metal.
It's at least goth. It might not be full on Doom, but it's Doom tinged goth.
And if it's not Doom, it sure as hell scratched that Doom itch I've been having for the past couple of weeks.
Why do you think it's not Doom, Gabe? I'm not disagreeing.
I think it leans in that direction, but it's really not all the way in the Doom category. It's got resonances for me with some grunge sound, also it reminded me of actually at quite a few points of Soundgarden,
Me too.
and
Interesting.
also the we'll talk about it later, but like kind of the garage elements of Black Rebel Motorcycle Club. Do you guys listen to them at all? So at certain points they reminded me of that. So it's like this grungy, sort of doomy, definitely gothy like flavor. And also I thought about the Crow soundtrack when I was listening to this a little
Oh
bit.
yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I can definitely see that. To me, I did get the grunge thing, but I didn't get Soundgarden. That makes me want to go back and listen to it again, because the thing that immediately jumped to me as far as the grungy side was Alice in Chains, and a lot of that had to do with the tempo and which for those of you who are not watching, David is wearing an Alice in Chains shirt. But the fact that he double tracked his vocals, and he is not the vocalist that Lane Staley or Jerry Cantrell is, but it gave that vibe to me.
I agree with that.
Yeah, like it definitely gave a grunge. Hell, there are even moments of like, man, this sounds a lot like Godsmack, which is just a wannabe Alice in Chains. And like I said before, Jan, this album made me think as if Paradise Lost and Alice in Chains had a child, and this is what it would be.
I mean, that's not the worst thing in the world.
It's not. I mean, it's a nice little, I guess you could say, area to play around in that I've enjoyed quite thoroughly. So.
An interesting thing about Paradise Lost is that despite the fact that this is at least doom leaning, as Gabe pointed out, the lyrics are kind of upbeat if you actually pay kind of close attention to them, as opposed to normally doom lyrics are very like downtrodden. This has all that atmosphere, but with it's like a perky goth, I guess, is what I would say.
I think though there's probably a difference, not that I'm like an expert on either doom or goth, but I feel like there's like a difference between the kind of feeling or like the sentiment like that doom metal definitely tries to evoke, and maybe goth, because goth is like, it's really a celebration of, you know, sort of like the dark side, rather than just like, okay, this is the dark side and it sucks, or you better get ready for this dark side. It's more like, I don't know. So I think it's more on the goth side of things to be, I mean,
that's true.
If you're talking about the lyrics, I just mean,
given I liked it, it's probably less doom. Given, no offense, man, but I mean, and I really am a sucker for Alice in Chains and early Godsmack, so this is right in that zone. It was sort of neo grunge to me, but successfully so. I mean, and then it had all the, you know, Church of Satan stuff. That which cannot withstand exposure to truth, die, or whatever it is, does not deserve to live. What do they say in that intro? It's that medium track, like it's the spoken word one, where like that which cannot withstand exposure to truth should not be spared.
Oh, I don't. It's something like that, but I don't remember the exact.
That is what it's. I'm pretty close.
I definitely don't remember what it said.
That's what. Because then I looked it up. I'm like, where'd that quote come from? And apparently, it was from literature. Like I went down a whole rabbit hole with that quote. I'm like, oh, is that Untitled Chapter? No, it's in fact literature. And anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I think I don't know. I thought the intro, not to get into tracks, but
you can tell us more about that.
the intro track and that track, I don't know. I thought they were pretty successful, because sometimes those things piss me off.
Sometimes they piss me off too, and we'll talk more about that later. But,
yeah, I guess we will.
But no, I thought that this worked very well. It's like I said, he cut his teeth in Life of Agony and Typo Negative, so there is definitely a Typo Negative vibe. I told Tracy when he at first floated the Paradise Lost comparison that it reminded me more of Typo Negative, although not with our favorite word of late, the whimsy or the tongue-in-cheekness of early Typo Negative anyway. Maybe some of the later stuff where they kind of got more serious as Peter was spiraling down his battle with his demons. But this definitely does scratch an itch that there probably is a whole scene of that I'm just not familiar with, but I'm glad that I stumbled across this album completely by accident. It just happened to come out this month and I needed to pick something. And I'm a fan of their stuff. I own physical copies of their first 3 records. So
I have to admit, I didn't go back in the catalog like I did with some of, Carcass I already know. And then Rivers of Nihil I went back some. I didn't with this. How do they compare to this? Do they sound pretty similar?
The sound I think on this one is a little bit more grungy than it was on the earlier albums. I also think that this is better than the album that preceded it, and I'm blanking on the name. One of our listeners can surely call me a poser and correct me as to what it is.
Poser, it's when the world becomes undone.
See, there you go. When the world
I
becomes
just went and
undone.
looked it up. Yeah, I'm gonna second you on that one, because that 2019 album was not that good, really. Like, I didn't think a lot of that one. I thought better.
I've never
of
heard
their
you all
first two
mention
albums.
this. Yeah.
I thought better of their first two albums, but that 2019 one, it just seemed flat.
It's not anything that we have reviewed before. It's just stuff that we've listened to and talked about.
Yeah.
Before we decided to do the podcast. So
It's one of those that's probably percolated the podcast to the forefront.
yeah, probably so. I mean, I would like to go back and do a couple of the earlier ones. But yeah, no, I think that this is, in many ways, this is a pandemic album. Like all of the ones that we're doing are, but this one is one that treats it as a topic, but not as the focus of the album.
I think that's right. Which I guess is how you deal with it. I guess on some level, no one wants to lean into it all the way, but yeah, that struck me as well. I mean, you're definitely, it is, at least to me as a 2021 human, it is very clear what you're talking about, but it's not so heavy-handed that maybe it won't resonate in 2031. I don't know. I mean, maybe we'll still be dealing with this bullshit in 10 years, but hopefully we won't be. So, well, you got to be careful. If you're this is a problem you have in history writing. If you're too presentist, no one gives a shit in 20 years. So,
and also from an artistic standpoint, if you're trying to sell stuff, if you lean too far into the horde, nobody wants to listen to it because they want to be escapist.
Agreed. Mm-hmm. Same problem.
I mean, it's that problem that a lot of news network, TV networks ran into when they decided to make a bunch of TV shows based around pandemic, and people are like, why in the fuck do we don't watch this? We're living it. Let's just know.
Yeah. But there were many things to get back to the sound of the album a little bit. I do see the neo grunge. I really like the guitar tone. Mm-hmm. I thought Sal did a pretty good job producing this. And I'm also guessing, since he was the producer, main songwriter, and lead guy for the band, he also probably sequenced the album. Not to get too much into tracks, but this has 3 instrumentals on it, and I thought that they were deployed well.
Me too.
As clean breaks to kind of separate almost into chapters for the album. Again, going back to that literature motif that David was talking about earlier.
There was clear. Oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
But I just want to say the only downside, and it's a minor nitpick, but I mean, again, we're here to review these albums, so we have to talk about the good and the bad as we see it. Is the vocals. I think he sounds fine. It works for this genre, but he is not a strong singer in any sense. And I think that's part of the reason why he had to double track his vocals.
Yeah, he's okay.
I think he's good enough for the job demanded by the music for what the style they're doing.
I do too.
I kind of like the double track behind it because it does add a bit of that slight delay echo to it that kind of gives more of a I don't say a like a haunted kind of reverb to it.
That was one of the things that made me think of Alice in Chains, because Alice in Chains did that shit a lot. They would put a slight delay on Lane's vocals, and to great effect.
I think the way that I perceived the vocals was kind of fairly detrimental to how I understood the album, just because there were so many points at which the music reminded me of other things that had been recorded a long time ago, and the voices on those tracks were really stellar. Like Lane Stanley and Chris Cornell and people like that. And if you're just doing a similar kind of music and you can't match that vocal power, and the music is not as interesting as the stuff that it sounds like, you're gonna have an issue, unfortunately. And as you'll hear on top of this, the lyrics are pretty trite. A lot of the lyrics are pretty trite, unfortunately. They do speak to universal themes, but they're not super original or creative. So that's also kind of an issue, problem.
Well, that first complaint is something that me and David have been saying about retro bands for a long time,
Yeah.
especially retro new wave
Power.
British heavy metal or power metal
Yeah.
bands. Yeah. So
That's
I completely coincide in that.
Yeah, occupying that space is dangerous because of the expectation structure it creates, and it made me like it some. But I did find myself comparing it to Alice in Chains a little bit more than Soundgarden. Now I'm like, oh, like Ben, I'm like, I could listen to this with that in mind. But certainly that Lane Staley space. But again, to back up to something Ben said and to give them some props, I mean, you can tell this guy's an old hand. I mean, I've been playing Life of Agony and Typo Negative back in the 90s. I mean, he, in terms of what an album should sound like, which I'm not sure will be an art form in 10 years. Well, I'm sure if Gen Z or what comes after them will give two shits about what an album is.
I think they don't.
I think they kind of don't already. So I don't know. I mean, my wife doesn't. She's a millennial. She's like, why do you care about albums at all? Like for her, it was individual tracks. So this may be, I don't know. I don't want to be premature in this, but I think this may be sort of maybe the last crop in some ways of true album artists. We'll see.
Which, to be fair, I mean, the music industry in the 30s, 40s, and 50s was very single based. So, I mean, it's kind of returned to that form. But yeah, I because of a product of my age and when I grew up, I care about albums and how the album is sequenced and what it sounds like. To the triteness of the lyrics, I guess. I mean, they are genre standard, I guess is what I would say. But it reminded me of Gothic literature, not like the Byrons or the Shelleys of the world, but like the also rans, for lack of a better term, which I guess speaks to your point about the triteness. Although I didn't think of it in those terms.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not sure what I was expecting, if anything at all. But I think it because at some points the music was not the most interesting thing going on, you had to kind of, or I was led to focus on the vocals. And you should know this about me, if you don't know it by now, that I don't generally listen all that closely to lyrics. I mean, I enjoy when I've come across lyrics that are good, but when I'm listening to music, I often find that I ignore them or put my own stuff in there so that I'm thinking about something, you know what I mean? Like my mind it does something weird when I'm listening to tunes. And so I found myself focusing on that more, which I don't usually or necessarily do.
So you're kind of like me then when it comes to vocals, and that you care more if the vocals match the music that's being played as opposed to as a whole set, instead of like, well, he didn't actually, his lyrics are shit, so fuck this band or fuck this song.
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's more about how does it work together, right? Like how do the vocals complement the music or vice versa?
That's where I'm at as well.
And I think that, you know, there are bands and there are songwriters who write amazing lyrics and they should be celebrated, but it's not, for me, it's usually not a deal breaker.
I care an awful lot about the lyrics, mainly because of my own experience in bands as being like not only the bassist, which I talk about a lot, but also the singer and the primary lyric writer. So I do care quite a bit about the lyrics and lyrical content, but again, for whatever reason, the atmosphere was set up and fit the lyrics, but you're right. I will admit that the lyrics are not overly deep or groundbreaking or anything. I kind of feel about them like I do the vocal performance overall. Like Tracy said, it fits the performance of what the band is trying to do.
Sure.
So shall we talk about songs, or does anyone else have something they want to say about the album?
No, I'm good for songs.
All right.
I can go ahead and lead off if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Man, so this album scratched a doom metal hole in my heart, and it was great to come into this after the gore. But I don't think there's a bad track on this album. I mean, take what you want for the instrumentals. They didn't really bother me that much. But if I had to pick tracks off this album as like really standouts, I'll go with Believe in Something, Lucifer's Son, Two-Headed Snake. I'm having to match these up the way they show up in my playlist. Reflections of the Dead, and even Slave to the Master. Like, I don't think there's a bad song on this album. I think all of the really heavy hitters are good or well dispersed throughout the album as well, to where you're not like through the first half and then the second half is feeling like it's a chore to get through as well, which I think is good on the sequencing part for the album.
I will go ahead and go next. If there hadn't been the other two instrumentals on the album, I would not have liked Infernum, because I don't think that is all that good. But when I take it as a whole with the other two instrumentals, and I view them as like palette cleansers or chapter resets for the overall album, then I think they work. Other than that, I agree with Tracy quite a bit in that I don't think there's a bad track on the album. And this album, despite being right at 45 minutes, this is one of those things where I would just decide to listen to the entire thing. I don't think I'm going to pull any of these tracks off and put on a playlist. I think that if I want to hear something from this, I'll just listen to the entire album. So I can't really. Two-Headed Snake, Propofol Dreams, I think is good. Reflections of the Dead, Lucifer Sun, essentially just the ones that Tracy named. But again, I wouldn't pull any of these off for a playlist. I would just listen to the album.
I guess I'll go ahead because I'm probably going to be the odd man out here. So I guess the tracks that I really dug were Shards of Glass, Lucifer Sun, and Reflections of the Dead.
Same.
The reasons that I like those songs were the vocal harmony was nice on Shards of Glass. The problem here is just that the music isn't forward enough in the mix. It's like the vocals are super, super forward, and it's really the music that could shine there. They also have a nice solo on that track. Lucifer's Sun is a really strong track because it sounds like they're channeling Sabbath. It doesn't get closer than probably Soundgarden or Alice in Chains. Not to say that Alice in Chains and Soundgarden aren't great bands, but I mean, that's about where they're at in comparison with this track. And then with the Reflections of the Dead, this is like the closest thing to doom metal, I think, on the record. The lyrics are really gothy. It even sounds like, that Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, the early stuff. So I dug that. I was really looking for a lot of heaviness that I didn't find in the first couple of tracks. I didn't really care for the instrumental stuff. The tempo was right for Cast Out from the Sky for doom metal, but it's just super, super repetitive. For Ben's information, Two-Headed Snake was the one that I thought sounded like Soundgarden.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah, I'll go back
without Chris Cornell singing over it, but it sounds like that. And what was the rest? Yeah, I think that Reflections of the Dead would have made a great closer, personally. But that's just me.
I ignore instrumental tracks I don't care about, so to me it is the closer. I'm with Gabe. I really like Shards of Glass, Lucifer Sun, and Reflections of the Dead. I think the middle of the album is pretty good, actually. The beginning aren't bad, but I think they really hit their stride at the fourth track through. I thought Slave to Master was okay too. There's no bad songs on here. I don't know if they're breaking any new ground. I kind of don't care. But this was admittedly not Gwar, so I guess we needed something different. And I was pleasantly surprised because some of what Ben picks, and I say this with deep love for Ben in my heart, makes me want to kill myself. When he really goes full doom, he knows what I'm talking about. When he goes,
I do know what you're talking about.
Full navel gazy, like the tempo is slowed so much that I feel like I'm listening to thrash, but in an event horizon situation.
Considering what one of the albums for this week was, I don't want to hear anybody bitching about navel gazing.
I don't
know what you're talking about, guys.
Amazing. Anyway, this was
navel gazing.
We missed out on the perfect week day with the 1-2 punch of like, God damn it, Ben. God damn it, Tracy.
Damn it, Tracy. No, anyway, I can't wait till I can say, damn it, Gabe. That's coming.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I enjoyed this, and it was cool to listen to. And I love Alice in Chains, obviously. So, yeah, it was good.
All right. Well, let's see how good. Time to grade this.
F. No.
F minus.
D. G minus.
I'm going to give this a B+. I think it's an excellent album. I don't think the material is strong enough to go up into the A's. And maybe it's just because I'm slightly in the bag for this material, this genre more than anybody else. But I think that this was an excellent album that I will return to.
I think it's a good
Okay.
album.
I will.
Oh,
I will. I'll jump ahead of you. I'll say it's worthy of an A- instead of 91.
Well,
Wow.
I don't agree with either of you, not by a whole lot, but I think it's a good album. It was a fun listen. It's a B for me, which I could maybe be sold on a B plus, but ultimately for me it was a B.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say this is for hardcore fans only. It's not what I expected, which is probably it's my fault that it wasn't what I expected it to be. But I'm looking for something a little bit heavier and with stronger vocals and maybe even stronger lyrics. But I think the problem is that the associations that the music threw out for me, they weren't immediately sort of gratifying because it was sort of like just stopping short of getting there.
It was a grunge tease.
It was grunge tease, right? Exactly. Or a doom tease, if you want to put it that way.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm here for going doom, full throttle, or grunge full throttle, maybe sometime.
I'm sure we will. I expect both of those. I know for a fact we have some grunge coming up in the next calendar year, so not very far off.
So Gabe, for those who can't see the grading rubric, that's a C plus, right? Because if you're listening on Anchor Stream, they can't see what this.
Sorry about that.
Holy illuminated rubric here.
Yes. So what does that, Tracy, make the Thunderdome Metal Reviews composite grade? Which we needed a better name for.
Yeah,
the Thunderdome review. We're gonna have to ask the question: did the album bring the thunder? Well, it came in at 86 overall, so it's a good album for everybody across the board. So
it'll probably complain to me, Gay, and Gabe, like in an email, that it can't get into med school because of us. But just our grade, Gabe, not the other grades they've gotten. Just the grades.
If they come with cash, I'm ready to do
that filthy Sal Eberscudo lucre that you don't know where he got
it.
Dude.
All of a sudden,
you don't want to know.
He's gonna get a random phone call, and Gabe's like, "Okay, I guess," and then he's gonna wake up one morning. And there's gonna be a dead horse in the bed, that horse head in the bed with him because he gave a C.
A skeletal horse head, because that's the bad signature.
I mean, he would have just embraced the darkness. I know, Gabe. He'd ride that fucking horse head to class. And
he's gonna come to my door and make me an offer I can't refuse.
I can't refuse. Exactly. Tracy, what in God's name are we doing next, and why?
Next, David begged and pleaded to get something fast and heavy in here to rip our arteries apart. And
Fuck
so
yes.
he making us listen to the new Carcass album in Torn Arteries.
Well, he got half of his wish because it is heavy. It's not overly fast.
It's not. It's a bit more, I admit, in the death and roll space, but we'll talk all about that.
Yeah.
I'm very excited that you humored me. And if you hadn't let me, I probably would have like Clockwork Orange your asses and made you listen. So it's best that we did it this way.
Best that you agreed. All right. Well, thank you for listening to Thunderdome Metal Reviews, and we'll catch you next time.
Baka!